Kunja Bihari, Jayo Gopi Jannavalabha, Jayo Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Gopi Jannavalabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranjana, Jaya Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranjana, Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Yamuna Tiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jai Gopi Janavalabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Gopi Janavalabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranjana, Jaya Yashodanandana, Jaya Brajajanaranjana, Yamuna Tiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Yamuna Tiravanachari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, 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 Jaya Kunja Bihari. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Radha Damodara ki jai, Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa, Privajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa, Privajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Karantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gora Premanandi. Hari Bol. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Divamrita Swaminita Namane Pachari Purva Rakshmcha Bhaktacharan Pravinata Parartata Karunyam Yasya Sarvejti Nama. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachayani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 25, The Glories of Lord Ananta. The root cause of material creation and the root cause of its destruction. In the biblical terms, the Alpha and the Omega. And we're reading text number 6. Sa eva Bhagavan Ananto Nanta Gunarnava Adideva Upasamhritamarcha Rosha Vego Lokanam Svastaya Aste. Word for word says Saha, that. Eva, certainly. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ananta, Anantadev. Anantaguna Arnavaha, the reservoir of unlimited transcendental qualities. Adidevaha, the original Lord, or non-different from the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Upasamhrita, who has restrained. Amarsha, of his intolerance. Rosha, and wrath. Amarsha, of his intolerance. Rosha, and wrath. Vega, the force. Lokanam, of all people on all planets. Svastaye, for the welfare. Aste, remains. Translation and purport. By his divine grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Sankarsana is the ocean of unlimited spiritual qualities, and thus he is known as Anantadeva. He is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For the welfare of all living entities within this material world, he resides in his abode, restraining his anger and intolerance. Purport. Anantadeva's main mission is to dissolve this material creation, but he checks his anger and intolerance. The material world is created to give the conditioned souls another chance to go back home, back to Godhead. But most of them do not take advantage of this facility. After the creation, they again exercise their old propensity for lording it over the material world. These activities of the conditioned souls anger Anantadeva, and he desires to destroy the entire material world. Yet, because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is kind toward us and checks his anger and intolerance. Only at certain times does he express his anger and destroy the material world. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Zahagana Raghunathan Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. We're very fortunate to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from our Param Guru, from the Yuga Acharya, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, because he helps us to understand the significance of what the Lord is doing and what the Lord is feeling, so that we can appreciate that the absolute truth is ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not for Srila Prabhupada's purports, his elucidation of the meaning of the verses, it would be pretty easy to reconcile this incredible description of Lord Anantadeva to some sort of mythology, which so many people do. Not because the story is incorrect, but because people fail to appreciate a person far superior to them. That's the real challenge. Not the far out description of Lord Anantadev. And the description is amazing, especially the part about his polished toenails and the princesses of the serpent kings and all this sort of stuff. It's just really remarkable description of this form of the Lord. The challenge in understanding the Lord in all cases is that he is a person far, far superior to us. Our personality, our identity, our self-expression is so muted, so suppressed by illusion and ignorance in the material energy, the conditioning of the material energy. We hardly even express a tiny portion of ourselves because of the medium of this material body and mind. But for a person who is not so burdened by material existence, who is not entangled, their expression, their personality is far superior. So this is what we should understand about the Lord in this form as Anantadeva and Sankarshana. That he's a real person. He's got real feelings, and those feelings are perfect. He feels anger because of the conditioned souls wasting their time, wasting their opportunity, not taking advantage of the facility. He feels actual anger at this. That is the normal response. That's the perfect response. But we can understand thinking, listen, this wild description of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this must be some sort of allegory, must be some sort of mythology. We can understand because we are due to be on the receiving end of that Lord's anger. We don't understand, how can the Supreme Personality of Godhead have any anger? If I were God, I would just be floating in bliss, and somehow or other, I would reconcile all the different types of people who are wasting their time and just love everybody, which the Lord can do that. He can do both things at the same time. That's part of his unlimited, inconceivable, and far superior personality. The Lord can love every living entity by providing the facility of this material world to get a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. And he can also be very angry at those conditioned souls who waste their time. He can express all of those feelings in perfection, not just those feelings, but every other feeling that we can possibly conceive of. Hence the Lord is known as Akila Chaitanya Rasa. Akila Rasamrita Sindhu, the unlimited ocean of conscious emotional expression and the origin of all conscious emotional feelings. This is the description of the Lord. That we feel some anger towards someone who's taking advantage of somebody else is a reflection of the Lord's doing it first. That we feel some love and compassion for somebody who's suffering is a mere reflection of the Lord doing it first. When we express those feelings, it's mixed with selfish desire, some sort of ego. Angry at this person who's taking advantage of me and what I've given, or what I've done. Or compassion towards a person who's similar to me, or towards a person who's going to reciprocate with me. I don't want to waste time with somebody who's not going to reciprocate. They can go to hell, right? That's why we have that saying in English, go to hell. If you're not going to do something for me in response to my helping you, then what's the point? So because our feelings of compassion and anger are mixed with some selfish desire, some selfish motivation, it is not perfect, but the Lord does it perfectly. That's the mythology. That's hard for us to grasp. That's why we call it mythology. How can the Lord have perfect emotional expression? The form that he takes is so that he can express those feelings. The Lord takes on a different form, an avatar, to express everything that he wants to. We can only do one at a time. We can only do one feeling at a time, at best. Maybe sometimes you can kind of do two feelings, but then it gets confusing and, the bandwidth of our brain kind of fizzles out. But the Lord can take on an entirely different form, an avatar, just to express a particular feeling. Advaitam, Achutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, Adyam Parana Purusham, Adya Parana Purusham. Can't remember. Anyway, Anantarupam, unlimited forms. In the form of Lord Rama, as we just heard about on Tuesday, he expresses a particular mood, slightly different from Krishna. It expresses a mood of dutifulness, righteousness and virtue, responsibility, integrity. In the form of Lord Nrsingadev, he expresses a particular mood, his feeling of anger at those who offend his devotees, and the pleasure of giving protection to his devotees. And in this form that we're reading about in this chapter, as Lord Sankarshana, Anantadeva, he expresses a particular mood. It's his feeling. Is the root of this material world. It's created, as Srila Prabhupada says here, to give the conditioned souls another chance to go back home, back to Godhead. He's expressing his compassion. Here's your opportunity. Here's all the facility. My dear parts and parcels, my own jivas, eko bahusyam, created of me. Well, existing eternally of me. We use the word created, but actually the jivas also exist eternally. The action of the jivas expanding from the Lord is not taking place within time. So he creates this material world just to give facility to go back home, back to Godhead. That's an act of compassion. That's his expression of love. And then he's angry when we don't take advantage of it. This is a very normal, the most normal emotional experience. Who are we to deny the Lord a normal emotional experience? We only do it because our emotional experiences are so abnormal. So we like to project. There's no way that Anantadev can feel some anger towards us. He's restraining his anger and not destroying us all. Oh, dear devotees, we have to recognize our problem is our own ego. That's our problem in understanding Krishna. The Lord is really quite simple, quite obvious. But because of our own ego, we fail to recognize his supremacy. And then we reconcile these descriptions of the Lord in these verses of Bhagavatam to some sort of fantasy. Like a person carrying an umbrella on a sunny day.
You cannot really block the sun with the umbrella, but you may try. So similarly, with our little ego, our tiny little ego, we try to block love of God. We try to block the appreciation of the Lord. We try to block everything that the Lord provides. And out of ego, say, no, 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 no. I'm doing everything myself. So let us not be so foolhardy to dismiss the significance of these descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a revelation of the Lord's emotional experience. And we should learn how to have genuine emotional experience. That's what it means to be a person. Not to become some sort of productive robot. That's where society is trending today, towards impersonalism. We only value your productivity. What are you consuming? What are you creating? Your emotional experience is not so important. As long as you keep the engines of the economy running. That's all that matters. So we're trending towards impersonalism. We're trending towards diminishment of the significance of emotional experience, and what to speak of a spiritual emotional experience. So reading these descriptions of Srimad Bhagavatam are very important, showing us how to be real people, to have feelings, just like the Lord has feelings. So Lord Anantadev has a mission, as is described in this purport here. His main mission is to dissolve this material creation. That's his task. He's going to burn it all down. But he checks himself. He checks his anger and intolerance. I have some slight understanding of what the Lord's going through here. Because when you try to help a person spiritually, you give so much facility. Usually that facility means to give of your own time and attention so that a person can grow in Krishna consciousness. That's the facility that's provided. Of course, there can be material facility as well, like some space, like a center or a temple. That is part of the facility. We shouldn't say that it's material. If it's used in Krishna service, of course, it's entirely spiritual. But the main facility that's given, really, is one's time and attention and care to what it is that they have to say, what it is that they're thinking, and to give some inspiration to think about Krishna. That's a lot of facility that you give to someone to help them to grow, whether we're preaching to somebody who's brand new or whether we're supporting established Vaishnavas. The facility that's given is the attention and the care. Hearing what someone has to say, and then also giving some sort of inspiration, an expression of our own love of God. That's those are 2 of the 6 loving exchanges. So I have some experience, perhaps we all do have some experience of how frustrating it can be, even angering, when you give so much facility to somebody to grow in Krishna consciousness as best as you can, but they might not take advantage of it. Sometimes even they can turn around and become inimical. It's rare, but I've seen a few times. They can turn around and become inimical towards you. My spiritual master, His Holiness Devamrita Swami, said, you know you've really been successful when someone dedicates a whole website to you. Just, criticizing you. It can happen. It can happen when you're really trying to give facility for someone to go back home, back to Godhead. That's what this material world is created for. As Srila Prabhupada says, it's a very important sentence in this purport. It has a lot of meaning. This material world is created to give the conditioned souls another chance to go back home, back to Godhead. But most of them do not take advantage of this facility. It's frustrating. Frustrating. It creates so much opportunity for people, but most of them will not take advantage of this facility. So I understand a little bit of what Lord Anantadev feels in his frustration. Why do people not take advantage of the facility? It's not always just they're a bad person. We don't want to succumb to that mentality, because that creates animosity towards other parts and parcels of the Lord, and it creates violence, actually. And there's enough religiously motivated violence in this world. The Hare Krishnas do not need to add to it. Our perspective should be one of compassion, and not just, oh, they're all so demoniac. They're all just so horrible. Anybody who doesn't chant Hare Krishna just like me must be a very bad person. Fortunately, that's not a trend in our communities so much, but it has become a trend in other religious traditions of the world, and nobody's really benefited from it. It's sort of like anger at someone who doesn't follow your religious principles. Nobody really benefits from that, as far as I understand. If someone can give an example of a benefit derived from being bigoted and intolerant towards others who are different from you, please share that example, because I mean, what little I know of modern and old history, I just don't see that anything good comes from demonizing those who cannot and will not follow our same religious principles. I don't see what good comes from that. Of course, we should be critical in our analysis of what should be done and what should not be done. But in almost all circumstances, it is not our place to just demonize a person who will not take advantage of the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. I don't see what good comes from that. So why is it that people do not take advantage? It's not necessarily that they're bad people. As Srila Prabhupada says in one purport in Adi Lila chapter 7 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, nowadays people have such bad qualities because they are subjected to miserable conditions. This is the compassionate perspective that we should try to cultivate when encouraging people to take advantage of the facilities to go back home, back to Godhead. People have bad qualities because they're subjected to miserable conditions. And therefore it's hard for them to take advantage of these facilities. Let's try to have this compassionate perspective. It's hard for people to take advantage of the facility to go back home, back to God. It's hard to take advantage of Srila Prabhupada's books, which is perhaps the greatest facility. And ISKCON's unique asset is Srila Prabhupada's books. There are many groups chanting Hare Krishna. There are many devotees of Krishna, many different organizations dedicated to Krishna, and of course so many dedicated to God in general. But our ISKCON has been especially effective in transplanting something all over the world because of our unique asset of Srila Prabhupada's books. That's what we've got. And it is one of the greatest facilities for going back home, back to Godhead. And we want people to take advantage of it. And if they do not take advantage of it, we should not just dismiss them as being bad people. Well, they're just losers. But recognize, because of being subjected to so many miserable conditions, it is hard. If we take the time to talk to them here, you see that it's very hard. Nowadays, people are so wary of any authority. And rightfully so. The Kali Yuga is progressing. It is marching on. And it's chipping away at the integrity, truthfulness in the world. We now live in the post-truth world. Aptly named, aptly coined term. Heralded perhaps by some recent presidents. The post-truth world, the world of misinformation, the world where nobody believes anymore that there is such a thing as expertise. And therefore they are very wary of authoritative literature like Srila Prabhupada's books. They're very wary of the authority of the representative of God and wary of the authority of God himself. And to some extent, you can't blame them. There's so little trust and integrity in the world's institutions these days. Naturally, people are going to be hyper vigilant of anyone who claims to have some knowledge about God or some expertise or some authority on the subject. Naturally, they're going to be very, very cynical because there is nothing certain left in this world. Imagine being a person born in the new millennium, so after 2000. You grow up in a time when the internet and social media makes all of the information that humanity knows available in one place, but all mixed up, garbled, no sort of metaphysical, foundational, philosophical context to make sense of it. You can find any information and the exact opposite information within seconds on any subject, anywhere. People who claim to have some leadership or some authority or some expertise very frequently are shown to have ulterior motives. Politicians, professors, heads of institutions. There's a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of wariness about any spiritual authority, and therefore people do not take advantage of the facility that's provided to go back home, back to Godhead. It's a challenging time. Actually, we were discussing it in our Bhagavad Gita discussion last night. And I brought up a quip from the old Roman poet Ovid. He said, "Nihil hominum certum est." Nothing human is certain. Nobody knows for sure anything. This is the environment that so many people live in. They don't know confidently anything. They study, some of these kids, they're studying in university, they learn some information. Oftentimes, by the time they graduate, everything that they've learned has changed, especially in technology fields, in many scientific fields. If you're in physics, I don't know if Kala Swarupa was here, but there's this old saying, never chase after a bus, never chase after a woman, and never chase after a physical theory, because there's always a new one just around the corner. It's a little sexist, but I guess it was a phrase made for men. But these things just change all the time. So imagine you spend all this money, you go to university, you become educated in a particular subject, and sometimes by the time you graduate 4 years later, the whole content has just changed, and you have to keep up. Nobody knows anything for certain, and there's a lot of doubt that there even is certain knowledge, that there even is certainty about God and about the facility for going back home, back to Godhead. In this environment, we try to share Krishna consciousness. The worst, of course, is when people, bewildered by uncertainty, therefore conclude, out of anger and frustration, that there is no certain knowledge and nobody knows. This is the worst. And we see this all the time. I don't know God. I don't know anything for sure. Therefore, nobody else knows. If they're talking, they're just making stuff up. Because after all, I don't know. So therefore, nobody knows. This philosophy of ignorance is becoming very, very common. If I don't know, then nobody knows. The sour grapes philosophy. So in this environment, we try to share Krishna consciousness. We try to inspire others to see with certainty there is God. And connection, union, yoga with the Lord brings about the greatest happiness. Krishna makes this pretty clear, actually, in chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 2, wherein he says, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam Pavitramidam Uttamam Pratyaksavagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartamavyayam. This is what we really need to impress upon people in general, if we can, try as we might. He says that this knowledge, this confidential knowledge about the nature of the soul as non-material, and the even more confidential, secret, Rajakuyam, about that soul's activities, its connection with the Supreme, its relationship with the Supreme. This confidential and most confidential knowledge, he says it's the greatest information, Raja Vidya. Pavitramidam uttamam, and purifies the self. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam, and it is self-evident. Self-evidently perceived, and therefore the perfection of religion. And susukum kartum avyayam, realizing as such one is happy. Avyayam, sukham avyayam. One's happiness cannot be diminished. This is the foundation that we as devotees need so that we can also impress upon others. The foundation of knowledge is first this Raja Vidya. You're not the body. There's a reason why Srila Prabhupada is always saying you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. Why does he say it all the time? This is self-evident foundational knowledge. It's a metaphysical foundation for understanding everything else with certainty. For one who's not realized this principle, then everything is uncertain. And they live a life of constant confusion and doubt and skepticism and cynicism. But if we can just get some realization of this Raja Vidya, the non-material self, the soul beyond the body, and even more confidential, the activity of that soul in relationship with the Supreme, if we can just get some realization of that foundation, some self-evident experience of that, then we can understand everything else. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam. This is really the perfection of religion. That's how Prabhupada translated Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam. Self-evidently perceived in the perfection of religion. That's really the point. Not to get some piety so that you can enjoy a better body in the next life. That's not the purpose of religion. To perform pious activities in the next life, then I can really enjoy it. No, the perfection of religion is to realize the non-material self and the activities of the soul in relationship with the Supreme Soul, Krishna. And it must be self-evident. That's what the practice of yoga is for, to get that self-evident experience. That means it doesn't depend on any appeal to external authority. I asked some of these people at our Gita class last night, what is it that you know for certain without appealing to an external authority? And one person was saying nothing. She was kind of shocked. Like, I can't think of anything that I know that is not an appeal to some other authority, either from your parents or from some, from your school or from, it could be a teacher. Everything depends on an authority of what someone else has said. And of course, we also appeal to the authority of our spiritual master, of Sri Krishna. But we are still meant to have the direct experience, self-evident experience of the soul, the non-material self. That's why it's pratyakshavagamam dharmyam. Should be directly perceived. And then the symptom of one finally having self-evident, fundamental, foundational, transcendental knowledge of the non-material self is that susukum kartam avyayam. One's happiness cannot be diminished by anything. So into this environment of ignorance, where ignorance is cultivated intentionally for profit, we stride in confidently telling people that there is certain knowledge, and it begins with, first and foremost, you're not the body, and secondly, your non-material self, the soul, has a relationship with the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. We have to have some confidence, some certainty, so that people will take advantage of the facility created by this material world and go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, Lord Anantadev, he's frustrated. He's frustrated and angry. So Prabhupada says this material world is created to give the conditioned souls another chance to go back home, back to Godhead. So we always give everybody another chance. But most of them do not take advantage of this facility. After the creation, they again exercise their old propensity for lording it over the material world. These activities of the conditioned soul anger Anantadev, and he desires to destroy the entire material world. Yet because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is kind toward us and checks his anger and intolerance. Only at certain times does he express his anger and destroy the material world. So, if we feel some frustration, some anger at those who do not take advantage of the facility provided by the Lord and who instead exercise their old propensity to just lord it over, trying to control, trying to exploit others, causing so much pain and suffering for themselves and for others, it's natural to feel some anger. Like a guest in a home who's just destroying it. You feel some anger. Why are you doing that? You shouldn't do that. You should take advantage of what's offered to you out of love. So we might feel some anger. And that's natural because the Lord feels that. He has these real emotions. So let us try to alleviate the Lord's anger. Just try to pacify him by helping others to take advantage of the facility to go back home, back to Godhead. Whether we're preaching to people who know absolutely nothing about Krishna, or whether we are supporting those devotees who are established in Krishna consciousness, but who struggle sometimes. We should always encourage everyone to take advantage of the facility by first taking advantage of it ourselves. And in this way, Lord Anantadev need not be so angry at us. He is a real person. He has real emotions. The only part that's difficult to understand is not the unlimited hoods of his serpentine form and how each universe is like infinitesimal in size on top of his hoods. That's not the part that's difficult to understand. What's difficult to understand is that there's a person who's so superior to us that his emotions are expressed perfectly. As in this case of his anger towards those who do not take advantage of the facility to go back home, back to God. Hare Krishna. So we've got a lot of work to do. Fortunately, we've got a lot of work to do. And it just so happens that there's nothing better to do. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitya Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. Thank you, dear devotees, for listening. Oh, servant of the enemy, Akari Krishna Prabhu. The enemy of the Aga demon is Krishna. I love your name. It's just such a great name. Hari Bo.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your very insightful class. I have some echo here, but I'll try my best to.
You sound all right to me.
So, with regards to anger that originates from a body that doesn't have lustful propensities. So yesterday, Thakur was giving examples of Prabhupada getting angry and how intense it was. You know, bringing grown men to the brink of tears. There's also Hanuman as well, how his anger was so powerful that he could burn a whole city with it. And in this verse, Anantadev's body has no lustful propensities, and his anger is able to destroy the whole universe. Whereas anger that originates from a body that has lust, it's limited in scope. It doesn't have so much of mystic power that it can actually manifest. So even Lord Brahma as well, his anger to some extent, although he has a materially refined body, but when he became angry towards his sons, the four Kumaras, Lord Shiva actually appeared from his eyebrows. So what is it about why is the anger that has no lust connected to it so powerful compared to when it's originating from a body with lust? It's very limited in scope, and power?
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. I mean, we see, oh, well, we get some insight from Krishna in Bhagavad Gita where he says that this anger turns into wrath and the wrath destroys the whole world. So it's like the difference between some some very pinpointed military attack or some reckless, super destructive attack like a nuclear warhead. Nowadays the militaries of the world, they try to use very targeted, they're all about these like targeted missile systems and stuff to really just go after one target and to restrain the anger so you don't kill innocents. That's kind of what's expected of militaries these days. Of course, in the past, a lot of warfare was just so reckless, or destroy whole cities, or destroy, women and children, and just like, and that's wrath that destroys the world. It could eventually destroy the whole world. So I guess we see that a sort of reflection in the difference in how people wage war. That if there's anger and it's not some lustful thing, it should not end up destroying. I think that's one symptom that we should see, and we have seen in Srila Prabhupada expressing his anger, is that it should not destroy someone's Krishna consciousness. But of course, that's also between that jiva and Krishna, how they're going to respond. But just the first thing that would come to mind, I'd love to hear what you have to say, Prabhu. What is the difference in anger expressed by someone who doesn't have any lust? I think that you have some insight you want to share.
No, actually, I'm
always thinking so deeply about these things.
No, I'm genuinely asking this. Maybe you might have thought about it. But, even given military examples, like Arjuna as well, being able to go to the heavenly planets. So even though he was a Kshatriya, but Vyasadeva gave Yudhishthira Maharaj, the brothers, the mantras, Pratishta mantras or something like that, for traveling great distances. And so you need to actually be a pure soul to actually utilize those mantras and ascend to the heavenly planets. And so he was seen to actually be fit. And even when he was in the heavenly planets and approached by his great grandmother Urvashi to consort with him, he refused. So
and she said to him, those sort of rules don't apply here.
Yeah.
Krishna Chaitanya.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was just generally asking to see who reflected on this point and this difference.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't have much reflection except that Krishna says that anger can turn into wrath, and wrath can destroy the whole world. And at least because most of us, admittedly, are not such pure souls, we should be very, very careful about expressing our anger. It doesn't seem that Srila Prabhupada did it very often, maybe demonstrating to us that we should be very, very careful to not control our anger. I don't have much more to say on it than that, Prabhu, but if you have some other thoughts or some insight, please share with us later.
No, thank you, Prabhu. I appreciate the answer.
Let's not wait around until Lord Anantadev expresses his anger and destroys the whole material world, although it will be glorious. Tarka Prabhu, would you like to add something on that subject or any other subject?
Any other subject. I choose any other subject.
Okay.
This
is Jeopardy.
But I would say, in connection with this issue of anger, that anger is sometimes very forceful, sometimes less forceful, not necessarily dependent upon the presence or absence of lust. There are many examples of, I can think of some demonic personalities, Kamsa or Ravana, for example, that would display anger with tremendous ferocity. there are different types of empowerment. There's empowerment that comes by dint of some achievement, some performance within the scope of material nature. You can, either by the performance of some sacrifice, some yajna, or performing perhaps pious activities to achieve some power, or there is empowerment that comes by dint of purity in Krishna consciousness, divine empowerment. In either case, one might have the capacity to manifest anger of unusual intensity. Those are just some of my thoughts on that subject.
Thank you very much.
Apart from that, I was just contemplating these verses that we've been reading, and the previous chapter that, the chapter we just wrapped up, chapter 24. So the question of why Shukadeva Goswami is describing the various planets within the material universe, the structure of the universe, the cosmology of the universe, and so on. This question has come up a number of times. And I, in the past, have asserted that such descriptions serve to enhance our appreciation of the Lord's greatness. And I stand by that. But I'm also aware that gradually, as the chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam unfold, we're going to see that it's much more than that. And for example, Shukadeva Goswami describes the cosmology of the universe, its structure, its features, and when he does so, it's not merely glorification of the Lord's greatness. He's also establishing the setting for further glorification of the Lord's pastimes in his various avatars. And we get a hint of this in text 27 of chapter 24, which we just finished. So he says, where is it? When Ravana, the powerful demon, came to gain victory over Bali Maharaj, Vamanadev kicked him a distance of 80,000 miles with his big toe. And he says, I shall explain the character and activities of Bali Maharaj later in the 8th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So a lot of what we heard about the structure of the universe, the different planetary systems, including the lower planetary systems, the subterranean heavenly planets, is the setting for the pastimes of Bali Maharaj and Vamanadev. And similarly, other avatars and great devotees, we will see that the narration of their pastimes is to some extent dependent upon an understanding of the structure of the universe, the different planets. It's the setting in which these things take place, the warring between the demigods and the demons. So it's anyway. That's one of my thoughts about that. Another example we're seeing now that we're hearing descriptions of Lord Ananta. So Shukadeva Goswami has explained to Maharaj Parikshit that Lord Ananta is residing. He says approximately 240,000 miles beneath the planet Patala. So it's the setting once again. He's established the setting so that we can picture these things and understand them. We can understand where we are situated within the universe relative to the different abodes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within this universe. We know that Dhruva Loka, that Sweta Dvip, there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is residing there. And here we hear that Ananta is residing beneath one of the subterranean heavenly planets. So it's helpful to have some understanding of the layout of the universe, is my point, I guess. On another note, and, speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes devotees are anxious to skip ahead to the 10th canto descriptions of the Lord's pastimes, and sometimes devotees neglect earlier narrations of Srimad Bhagavatam, regarding them as inferior. So, for example, some might say that, well, these descriptions of the cosmology in the universe are not so important. What's really important is Krishna's pastimes. There are some that have that kind of a mentality. So, Srila Prabhupada he spoke about this kind of mentality. He was very critical of it. He stressed the importance of giving full attention to every incremental step presented in books such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And he reminded us that all the Krishna Gita presented in these important books is of an absolute nature. And so it will be appreciated with equal enthusiasm by a truly advanced devotee. It's not that, that this aspect of the philosophy or that aspect is higher or lower necessarily. It's all absolute, and it all of it is nectarian. All of it is uplifting, purifying. It doesn't matter. This brought to mind, I was thinking about this. It brought to mind something that Mukunda Prabhu mentioned the other day. He was saying that Srila Prabhupada had primarily established Radha Krishna deities throughout ISKCON. And he explained that he had installed Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan because the location, Raman Reti, was the site of their pastimes with their cowherd boyfriends. And there wasn't time for me to comment further at the time, but I wanted to say that Srila Prabhupada mentioned on more than one occasion, he stated that he had established Krishna Balaram, he had installed deities of Krishna Balaram to offset what he perceived to be an imbalance in the minds of devotees. He was critical of the fact that devotees tend to place tremendous stress on the Leela of Radha Krishna and Madhurya Ras to the relative exclusion of other rasas and modes of service, different relationships with Krishna. Devotees, of course, may relate to Krishna in any of 5 different primary rasas, right? There's the neutral adoration of Shanta Ras, there's servitude and Dasya Ras, friendship and Sakya Ras, excuse me, and parental love in Vatsalya Ras, and then there's conjugal love in Madhurya Ras. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to increase awareness of other rasas and Sankhya Ras, or friendship with the Lord in particular. And he wanted to facilitate those who relate to Krishna in that way. So this he stated to be a primary reason for establishing the deities of Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan. And that's all I've got. So I want to thank you for a really nice class. Provoked a lot of thought, and I'd like to comment on a bunch of things that you said, but if I got into it, we'd go way over time. I know you're busy on Saturday, so I'm not going to go there. I'll stop here. Hare Krishna.
I'm sorry, Prabhu, but also thank you, Prabhu, for giving us some insight into what's going on behind the scenes at the Krishna Balaram Mandir establishment. It's really, really interesting. Mr. iPhone or Mrs. iPhone, would you like to say something?
Dhanavad Prabhuji, it might be a little bit late.
Oh,
No.
Mukunda Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Haribo. It might be a little late.
Okay.
But
Sorry about that.
yeah,
Maybe,
maybe next time. Yeah.
okay, my apologies. But yeah, we should wrap up. Unfortunately, I do have to get into something right now. So thanks for tuning in. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Dwadasi ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.